Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Two Perfect Gentlemen. It is June 29th, 2012. I'm the Promise.
And I'm Dominion, and today we're going to talk about some of the StarCraft 2 matches that happened over the weekend. We wanted to do more coverage on the NASLs, however, we missed a lot of them and couldn't really find the videos. So this weekend, we also had the IPLs, and we're going to cover a lot of those games, primarily between Liquid and Prime. I had a lot of really fun times watching those two teams go at it. So let's go ahead and start off with the opener, which was Liquid Zinio versus Anyang Prime. It was a ZVZ map, or a ZVZ matchup. Corey, let's take it away, man.
I mean, first of all, dude's name was Anyang, and I don't know if anyone listening out there is going to get this, but it's all about Arrested Development. And I'm glad he went as far as he did because every time they said his name, I wanted to say hello to the screen. But in terms of Anyang versus Zenio, that first match, it was a fairly standard, fast opener by Zerg. He just almost immediately went Banelings and Zerglings, and he just kind of rushed Zenio, and that I mean, I don't think the game lasted longer than 6 minutes. It was over really fast, like really fast.
Yep.
He ransacked his main, and it was GG.
Yeah. The thing that I really liked about Anyang's play is he kind of knew how Zinio was going to play. He played with Zinio played with an extremely passive play. He went for a really fast hatch, 17 pool, 13 gas. It was really, he wasn't actually. I don't think he went 13 gas. That was Anyang, but and Anyang just went for a one base push with a 13 gas, which was really early for a Zerg player, and a 12 pool, and just totally demolished him with speedlings and banelings. I was really impressed by the play. I really felt bad for Zinio, especially after watching Project. I think it was Liquid Rising, which was a really good movie, by the way. Really good documentary. I recommend it to everyone, and if you can, donate. And Zinio has a lot of really good games, but he's more of a macro player, I think. He is a lot more proficient in that area, I think, like a lot of other pro players. But for him to take for Anyang to take Zinio out in 6.5 minutes is ridiculously fast.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a fairly standard, fast Baneling opener, and he really just crashed through his mineral line. And I think Zinio knew right off the bat that he wasn't coming back from this. It was too much too early, and he was going to have no economy whatsoever going ahead, and that was that. And quite honestly, I don't really feel bad saying that Anyang cheesed the shit out of him. And I honestly don't think Zinio was expecting cheese. I honestly think that Zinio was expecting something a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess higher tier in terms of skill level. And I think that cheese just caught him completely off guard and just ran through him. Like I said, GG.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree. And when I say that I felt really bad for Zinio, it was kind of he was backed into a corner type of situation. Like there was no way he was going to come out of it. There was no way.
Well, yeah, when your entire mineral line's fucked, I mean, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And like I say that he cheesed, but that's really not talking down on the match or his play. Like he cheesed him. And a lot of people have a really negative connotation about cheesing, but I mean, when it comes down to it, cheesing is just as viable a strategy as anything else. You just,
Mm.
either learn to defend against it or you just quit playing StarCraft. Um, and so like I didn't mean that in a bad way. I really didn't think that Xenio thought that he was gonna cheese him. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
think so either.
and I think Anyan might have actually been counting on the fact that he wouldn't be expecting, uh, a quote unquote cheese tactic. And I do believe that that's one of the factors in why he chose to just go fast banelings and just run through his mineral line.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Well,
Yeah.
for those of you people out there that don't know exactly what IPL is or how it works, it's not your standard bracket. Uh, well, it is, but it's team based. And the way it works is the first two sets that go up against each other, it's team versus team. And each team puts out one person first, and whoever wins faces the next person, next person, next person, until the end of the game. And you'll know why I'm saying this because once we get to Liquid Tasia, you'll understand what we mean by an all kill, uh, which was really fantastic, by the way. So the second game was Liquid Hey Pro versus Anyang Prime, um, and it was on Cloud Kingdom. Anyang opened with a Speedling expand. It was a much safer defensive type of build coming from Anyang. Personally, I love these ZVZ builds.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about this game was that um Anyang actually got speed before Hey Pro.
Yeah,
And there was a point in time where I wasn't 100% sure that Hey Pro was going to get his speed in time to counter his Zerglings because I mean Anyang's Zerglings are pretty much following Hey Pros around the map and just picking them off as they ran away.
yeah,
And I telling you, if that speed hadn't have come, pretty much in the middle of his pack getting chased down,
hmm
I think that match might have been over right after that. Because all he would have had to do was just loop around and go back in the mineral line, and it's fucking it's Anyang versus Zinni all over again.
yeah,
But he did manage to get speed to pop in the middle of that confrontation, and he was able to pull back into his natural.
yeah. The really nice transition that I think that was made was when Hey Pro kind of pushed back with a Ling Banling, and he did some really amazing damage at Anyang's natural. If I'm not mistaken, he took out quite a few of his drones and was able to pull Anyang around the map and try to throw him off a bit. And then just like every other Zerg match, it kind of pushed into a heavier Roach Zergling type of build. Um, but once Hey Pro pushed up in there and lost a bunch of roaches, two base versus two base, it was pretty much over for Hey Pro at that point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, really, what the end of this match boiled down to was Hey Pro decided to switch to roaches first,
Mhm.
and he actually had a fairly sizable comp of roaches, banelings, and zerglings. The only problem was that he pushed into Anyang's base, and then pretty much had a moment of indecision,
Yes.
and then kind of just fucked around in his front door, and then pulled back. And at that
hmm
point, Anyang had just popped. I want to say seven more roaches than Hey Pro had. So by the time by the time Hey Pro decided to go all in, he was actually outnumbered by Anyang, and he probably realizes this because hindsight's a bitch. But if he hadn't have had that moment of indecision on his front door, and he pushed through, it honestly would have been match Hey Pro.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and I knew it the minute I saw that he went in and he just dicked around, and then he pulled out, and I was like, that's it. That's the game.
My dad always told me that the one thing that you could really do that really fucked you up is to hesitate.
Hmm.
And I think in this case, this is a perfect example for that. Um, my dad was telling it to me as if I was driving. But I like to think that in StarCraft, it's pretty much the same thing. If you're going to set your mind to do something, you need to do it. If you're going to do an all-in, you don't try to all-in and then say, well, fuck, I'm going to lose, so let me just run back. You don't do that. You don't hesitate. If you hesitate, you lose the game. So, again, going back on what you were saying, I completely agree with you, and I think if HeyPro would have pushed through and tried to snipe out a couple of roaches, even 7, he probably could have won that entire matchup, and but again with Anyang, like I to say that I've never heard of him before, um, I think he did an amazing job ZVZ. Like his ZVZ is almost perfect.
Yeah, no, his ZVZ play was on point, and like you, I had literally never heard um of Anyang Prime before.
Yeah,
So really getting to see him in this tournament was really cool for me because it was a player that I have never encountered ever in any types of streams or events, and here he is, and he's just tearing through some of Liquid's bests. And just to go back on what we touched on a second ago, this match was interesting because it's not every day that you get to see a pro match where someone does hesitate
yeah,
and it costs them the match.
yeah.
That's usually pretty few and far between. I think in terms of pro play, where a hesitation actually costs them the game. Usually, if they hesitate, it's for a good reason. It just he didn't have a good reason, and it
Well, I think
cost him
he
big time.
his hesitation came too late. He was already in his base, and he was like, "Shit." I probably could have just gone into a more defensive, started droning up some. Probably could have gone with a more standard Roach Infester build for kind of a mid-game attack, and and he probably could have won out because I believe he dropped his hatch first, so he had that slight economy lead that could have actually led him to win the game. Um,
Well, I mean, he hesitated because Anyang, and we saw this through all of Anyang's games, is he's a big fan of spine-crawler lines.
that's very true. Yeah,
And that's the reason why he hesitated is he went up into his base, he saw the line of spine crawlers, and instead of playing it, what drove me nuts about HeyPro's play was that instead of singling down the spine crawlers, he was unnecessarily moving them into the spine crawlers range and then backing them out without doing any damage whatsoever to the spine crawlers.
yeah,
And that's really what he spent the entire time of hesitation doing, was pulling in and out of their range and just getting whacked on and giving nothing back.
yeah.
I think
Well,
that's what drove me crazy was that fuck it, if you're gonna go in and get hit, at least hit them.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that from HeyPro's standpoint, I think that what he thought was, he had just had that engagement in his base. He was a little behind because of some of his drones died. So he wanted to attack as soon as possible to try to get that counter in and do as much damage as he could. And where I would normally agree with that because of the fact that Anyang pulled out at least half of his Zerglings, um, that push shouldn't have really happened. He probably should have gone on a more defensive, hold off the front, possibly expand to a third, try to take it to the mid game. And I think that HeyPro probably would have done a lot better there. Now, I haven't gotten to see HeyPro play a lot of tournaments aside from this IPL right now. Unfortunately, I really like his play, and I would like to see him progress a little bit further. Like I said, especially after watching that documentary for Team Liquid, I have so much respect for those guys. So all I ever want to see is for those guys to really do well. Um, so that being said, I think that Hey Pro should probably work on his ZVZ a little bit more. He could go up against Zenio or Sheth, who's their other Zerg player, and he might be able to. There's Rhett too. Liquid Rhett would be a good opponent for him to go up against as well. And hopefully he can better his game so next time this hesitation doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
So that being said, Anyang ends up winning that one as well, and it moves on to Game 3, which was Liquid Hero versus Anyang Prime. Liquid Hero, for those of you that don't know, he won DreamHack Winter 2011 this past year, and he's a Protoss player. He's also very good. He's a Korean player, and the map was in Tomb Valley. Anyang opened
He's
up...
also good at fighting Zerg, too. I gotta put that in there as well.
Yes.
Hero does very well against Zerg as a toss.
Yes.
And I think that was key in their decision to put him in because it is the best out of 9. So, first of 5 wins are already down by 2.
Right. And Anyang this time opened up with a pretty standard 13 pool to expand. Hero goes with a Forge Fast expand. It's pretty standard with a Protoss versus Zerg, because they want to try to get that expansion up faster or as fast as the Zerg players, so they don't have that bonus. And then I believe that Hero dropped a pylon at the natural to deny, at least for a couple of seconds, deny Anyang that expansion, and then Anyang had to actually walk all the way around because there was some destructible rocks between the natural and the third, and he had to walk all the way around and finally create his hatch right up there on top.
Yeah, he what he ended up doing was he popped a pylon right outside of the ramp to his natural, and or his main, I'm sorry, and he simultaneously blocked off his first expo and gave himself an avenue to come in and harass the mineral line.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you that I thought that Hero started off this match really well.
I agree.
He was pulling in some really good macros, some really good micro, and he was keeping Anyang really harassed in the beginning, which I thought was boding well for Hero because so far we hadn't really seen Anyang get harassed early on.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it was Anyang doing the harassment, and it threw him. You could tell that it definitely threw him for a loop for a little bit, and then he got his composure again, and he took out the pylon and took out the zealots. But it was a strong opening by Hero, definitely, to try to get Anyang off his game.
Yeah, and with this game, there was a lot of things that I agreed with Hero, and there was a lot of things that I disagreed with.
Yes, I know, like the fucking DT shrine.
Exactly. I have no idea why he went DTs. As Day9 always says, by the way, I was hoping that we were going to do this cast a couple days ago, because I just wanted to say happy birthday, Day9. But as Day9 always says, win behind Dark Shrine. But Hero was clearly ahead at this point in the game and dropped a Dark Shrine. Now, I agree with the harassment, okay? But there's a lot cheaper units like Charged Zealots that would have done much better.
Yeah, but he made the Dark Shrine, but he didn't actually build any Templars.
Yeah,
at first. He just
Right.
had the building.
Yeah.
Which is why when you were like freaking out, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I mean, he's not building anything. He just has the building. That's not necessarily a bad idea in and of itself because, you've got it there if you need it.
Yeah.
And at that point in the game, it was really a whole lot of nothing going on. It was just Anyang and Hero, farming their expansions and building units. And like that phase went on for a good 15, 20 minutes.
Well, yes.
Not a whole lot happened. They were just building.
Well, you can't really say that not a whole lot happened because Hero was doing drops the entire time.
Well, he was doing drops the entire time, but they weren't doing anything.
Exactly. That was my statement. Like, why build a Dark Shrine and then try to do drops
Well, see,
But you
I
know that there's overlords everywhere,
yeah, well, there are overlords. There's also were there corruptors at
or
that point?
overseers.
If
Um,
overseers. I don't think he had gone corruptors yet. Um,
yeah, no,
but
not yet.
I he was doing drops constantly, but nothing was happening because of the drops. The drops were being thwarted almost instantly,
Yeah,
and I think that might have played a small part in why he did go for the DT shrine early because I think he got a sense that this might not go his way in the short term, and it turned out that it didn't quite go that badly for him in the short term.
hmm
It pretty much just held the status quo. But like I said, he still had that building. He
yeah,
wasn't, he wasn't wasting minerals and gas building,
hmm
but he had it there if he needed it.
yeah. That's true. Now there were a couple of drops with DTS that I didn't really agree with it because again there were so many overseers out on the map at that point that it was pretty much rendered useless. Now,
Yeah,
2-2 DTs or 1-1 DTs are really nice because they can pretty much one-shot a drone. Um, but they attack so slow, so you might get two
yeah,
in by the time Zerglings come in, surround you, and then kill off the unit you just lost. I think it's 150 minerals, 150 gas.
yeah. It's pretty expensive for
Yeah,
us.
it's an expensive unit.
Yeah, and
Um,
you know, part of the problems with the drops too was that after that initial harass, Hero was having a little bit of problems with his micro.
mhm.
There were just certain aspects of his unit control on an individual basis that weren't he wasn't really on point. And a really key example was him and Anyang were having some friendly gatherings near the center of the map,
Yeah, yeah,
and all of a sudden, out of the blue, for like no reason, he just walks an entire contingent of stalkers into a spine crawler line
yes,
and loses
yep.
all of them.
Yep. Now, what I think he was doing there, and I'm gonna have to agree with him on what he did, because he was just trying to free up food and keep Anyang on the defensive. He was trying to, and you'll see it if some of you folks go back and watch this particular matchup. It was about an hour and 30 minutes long. Um, Hero actually kept Anyang on the defensive the whole time. Now, if you'll remember, Anyang is really good at offensive attacks. But according to this matchup, he was really bad at reacting to defensive attacks, um, or trying to overcome the defensive attacks so much that he could push and counter back. Um, but at that point in the game, when he was tossing stalkers into lines and trying to get them killed, he did the same thing with his probes. He was just trying to free up some food so that he can go
Well,
with
yeah,
that.
but that was way later on when he had his mass carrier army. This was way back towards the center of the match. I would say
Mhm.
somewhere around the 30-35 minute mark,
Oh, okay.
where they were just poking at each other midfield,
Mhm.
and then out of the blue, like I said, he just takes probably 5 or 6 stalkers and just runs them into a spine corner line and gets them demolished. And I'm going to side with the casters who were casting the event. I think he just misclicked and it cost him a lot. But it's stuff like that we saw kind of come back to hurt him later on in the match,
Yeah.
where he had quite a few missteps as far as individual unit placements were concerned.
Right, and I feel like the DTs also played a large part in the fact that he lost. And I'm just gonna say that because he built so many carriers, uh, and at the same time, like he was continuously doing stalker drops and DT drops and Archon drops and dark and High Templar drops. Like those are all extremely high gas units, with the exception of the stalker, but
Yeah,
everything else is extremely high gas units, and you're just wasting them.
yeah. He went from having about six K in the bank for each to like 5K minerals and like 300 gas in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah.
And I will defend his High Templar usage was
On point. Oh
spot
yeah.
on. He
Oh yeah.
was just murdering workers left and right. It was his psi storms were out of control.
Yeah.
But I am going to agree with you that he misread the situation and he built way too many carriers. Um, I didn't think he built that many DTs, but if he did, that's a definite problem too.
Well, I
Uh,
think throughout the majority of the game, he probably had about 12 DTs. He was doing, uh, I would almost say there for close to 6 minutes, he was doing constant drops and or warp-ins with them. The only time that I really saw it pay off, and I wouldn't even really call it a payoff, was when he took out a couple of, I think it was his lair. No, he took out the lair with the Stalker Colossi army. But again, it was mined out, and Anyang was like on the other side of the map with his third, fourth, and
yeah,
fifth base. And I don't think Anyang really cared to, you know, fix it or kill it off. Now, I will say this: I have never seen mass recall play like I did in this match.
yeah,
That
yeah.
was some of the most amazing play.
He let his carriers, excuse me, he let his carriers get to the absolute brink before recalling them. And not only was he recalling them to save parts of the map, do you remember when he led his carriers into one of his expos? Pretty much got all of Anyang's air force over to that base and then mass recalled them back to his natural?
Yes,
That was
yes,
beautiful.
absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. And, this is the kind of play that I wish that, StarCraft had nowadays. It's kind of a fuck with you over here and then surprise, now I'm over here.
Yeah.
You see that a lot in TVZ, sometimes in TVT. It's pretty nice to watch with the drops. I'm glad to see that someone else is making use of drops for Protoss. It's kind of putting a different spin on the game.
Yeah.
I think if he was going up against anybody else at this point, because Anyang, let's face it, was on a roll, and when you won that many games against a high class player or players like Zinio and HeyPro, you have the most insane momentum at that point, and you are just like, you know what, I could beat anybody right now, and you do whatever you can to win, and he did exactly that. He said, you know what, I'm just going to defend up, and he's using a ton of resources by attacking me. And as he continues to do this, I'm just going to hold it off. I'm not going to lose any units, and I'll push back when he's done mining out the map.
Yeah, but you know what? He didn't. But that's the thing. He didn't even have to push.
No,
Fact of the matter is Anyang had no major engagements on Hero's side of the map at all.
mm-mm.
For the entirety of the game, map control was Hero's.
Yeah,
To the point where Hero he mined out 14 gas nodes. 14, and he was
14.
working on 15 through 17 when the match ended.
Yeah, yeah,
Like hour and 15 minutes this motherfucker went on for. And in my opinion, and I'm letting you guys know right now, I am not a good StarCraft player. I'm good at watching it, and I'm semi good at analyzing it, but I can't play for shit. So your mileage may vary according to my opinions. But in my opinion, Hero lost because he misread the entire game. I think he let Anyang give him a false sense of superiority by staying on his side of the map, and I think he misread just how good Anyang's unit comp was. And
mm-hmm.
I think that when he realized that Anyang was really effective at fungal growthing his interceptors, he needed to stop building carriers.
Yeah,
And he didn't. He built more. And that's what ultimately killed him was the fungal growths combined with the corruptors
yeah.
won Anyang that game. And I don't think Hero read that properly, because if he had, he would have stopped building carriers. He would have gone for a more mobile air unit, and in the process would have had so much more food left over
Yeah,
for anything else he would have had to do. The fact of the matter is that by the time he was ready to push all in, he had no gas. All he
right.
could do, which funnily enough is what he did, is build like 80 zealots and just lead them to their death because they can't hit corruptors or broodlords,
Yeah.
which was the main part of his army. He just dominated the air, and it won him. It won him the game, and it cost Hero.
Yeah. And like I said, I think there was a lot of really good play on Hero's part.
Oh, there was,
Um,
like, without a doubt.
and I really loved watching that matchup. I wish that I saw that kind of stuff at bigger games like MLG. But I can't really complain. I like the fact that he was you know hitting here and then hitting here and then hitting here
Yeah.
and then hitting here. It was really fun to watch. I'm sure it had to be extremely difficult to play. I believe at one point they looked at the at the effective APM for both players
It
though,
was
and I think
averaged over 300
yeah for
for
Anyang, which
Anyang.
was
Yeah,
pretty insane, if I do say
yeah,
so myself.
and that was at like the hour 10 mark. He
I
was
think
averaging
yeah
300 APM.
yeah, and I thought I was pretty impressive by typing 111 words a minute. This guy is moving his hands around the keyboard so many times that in 1 minute he's actually touching the keyboard somewhere 300 times.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you know what? Bottom line, an hour 15 minutes. You really need to have top-notch play from both sides.
Yeah,
Okay, at the pro level, at let's say our level, not necessarily. You guys can, both parties can suck enough where you can drag this thing out for an hour and just be miserable.
yeah,
But I mean, at the pro level, to go over an hour, like it really needs to be one of a kind play on both sides. And unfortunately, like I said, Hero's play just wasn't as good as Anyang's.
yeah. So after that game, Liquid Teja came up, and um, if you guys don't want any spoilers, don't listen to the rest of this because this is pretty. We're jumping to the end now. Um, Liquid Teja actually went with an all kill for against Prime. Um, Plowed through Anyang and all the other players in between. He won 6 games in a row, and the final game was probably one of my favorite. It was Marine King Prime
Like it.
versus Liquid Teja.
I didn't think it was that great.
Well, I don't. I liked the way that Marine King Prime was playing. Um,
Yeah.
it was kind of off skelter and was built to actually throw Teja off because it's completely out of the realm of what you would normally see. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, I would expect to see this kind of play against like Slayer's Boxer because he likes to manipulate things, make things a little weird with like proxy barracks or proxy starport. But in this game, we had a proxy starport with a I don't believe it was a Banshee, was it? It was a Medevac,
Yeah.
and he was taking his barracks and actually sending all of his units over to the watchtower closest to Teja's base and started pushing in pretty hard. And I thought he did really good at the beginning because as he was standing in Liquid Teja's natural, keeping him out, um, he was also expanding back home. So he was actually ahead economically, and he was also ahead in army value, which is uh, not something that you normally see. And he attacked at a pretty good time. Teja didn't have siege yet, siege tech, and it basically came down to the wire, and it was Hellion Marauder Marine Medevac versus siege tank, a couple of Marauders, and a couple of Marines, and Teja just so happened to pull through.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I call me jaded by the rest of the matches that we saw in this series. I,
Mm-hmm.
I, I thought Teja versus MKP was a good matchup. Um, Pretty much everything you said is true, and is and was pretty cool to watch. But I mean, to me it just kind of played out in a fashion where. Um, both sides did their thing. They fought. Someone won.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just it didn't have the kick that some of the other matches did
Well,
before that.
the kick. I would say the only thing that I was disappointed about is the fact that the match ended in 12 minutes.
Well, yeah, I mean it was fairly fast. It was really
It
actually
was actually
you,
20 minutes.
you could fit three. Yeah, you could fit three of Teja's wins inside the Ion versus Hero game and still have time.
Yeah, that's that.
And still have time because his first two wins against well, Teja's first two wins, one against Anyang and one against Boom Boom.
Mhm.
Uh, I believe grand total 22 minutes
Wow.
for the first two wins because he just pretty much tore him apart really quickly at like the 12 13 minute mark. And then this one with Marine King Prime, like I said, you could take probably his entire series. No, because that game versus created was really long. But I mean, he wiped up 3 to 4 of his games in about the same amount of time it took Anyang to beat Hero. It was Teja's play was really intense. He was just tearing people up left and right. It was pretty crazy to watch.
Yeah, and I really like the way that the game actually finished up. Um, with the leapfrogging of the siege tanks.
Yeah,
And I think the one thing that really killed MKP was the fact that he didn't have siege tech on time, and it really backfired on him there at the end. He tried to
yeah,
put a siege tank on the side, but those medevacs, gave him sight and just all. I think he had 6 tanks, just demolished the one tank that
yeah,
MKP had.
yeah. I mean, it was actually the opposite of what I was talking about with the Ion versus Eno game, where he didn't have speed and time,
Hmm.
and it didn't cost him that game right away, but it ended up costing Marine King Prime the game in a much more timely fashion because
Yeah,
while he was still waiting for it to come through, he lost.
right.
So, again, that's two mistimings from pro players that, like I said, you don't get to see very often. It does happen, uh, but it doesn't happen that often where you'll see someone in, you know, like Marine King Prime go into battle with unsiegeable tanks.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is between in those two matchups, they were doing things that they normally wouldn't do. Like with Hero, you would normally go with a Stalker, Sentry, Colossi, maybe a Mortal or Archon build,
Hmm.
um, and then you would push in, and you would always get a mothership against the Zerg player at a 20-minute mark or past the 20-minute mark, solely because you want to do the Archon toilet. Um, but and in this case, Marine King Prime was doing all that really crazy um, proxying and pushing early and trying to do things that he wouldn't normally do instead of doing like a Marine siege tank medevac.
Hmm.
So the games were a little weird for them because they played awkwardly from their
Yeah,
normal
they were
play.
definitely playing outside of their normal comfort zone for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of composition and timings.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that this was a good experience for all of them. I really hope that they all work on doing something similar uh, all the time because as much as I like to watch a TVT solely based off of the uh, both teams going Marine Siege Tech and Medevacs, I love the shit out of that solely because it's a mind game, and with the scans dropping constantly and running like rogue units into your enemy's territory, it it actually has come a long way. I used to hate TVT because of the way that it was set up, but now, like
Hmm.
now that these players have gotten their shit down and everything's together and they've got their build timings right and everything, and they can start focusing on micro more, these
Mhm.
games are just exceptional. Um,
Yeah, they were for the most part the TVT games were really exciting. Um, but again, like in the Marine King Prime game, there was still like these weird moments of strange micro.
mhm.
I think it was around like the 15 minutes ish, where Teja was just pretty much camped outside of Marine King Prime's base,
Yep.
and Marine King Prime was just throwing units into his siege tank line.
Yeah, that was a bit weird.
Like I didn't understand why he was doing it. Like they're not coming into you, dummy. They're just sitting there killing you.
Well,
And like, he just kept throwing them at him for like 2 minutes.
here's the beautiful thing about some of these games. If you're not paying attention to your units for even a fraction of a second, because I believe that Teja was actually in MKP's base with a couple of Marines and 2 medevacs. If you don't put your units on hold position, and Teja goes, okay, I'm going to push and pull back, and he pushes and pulls back, those units automatically, because of the AI, will push back. They will chase those units, and then that's when the siege tank just completely obliterated that portion of his army. And
Yeah.
they did that like twice. So I was kind of hoping, the second time that he would put those units on hold position, but he never did, and I was a little upset by that. But uh, I'm sure he was probably running well over 200 APM, and with the stress of the moment,
Yeah.
there really wasn't much that he could do. And I think that he handled it pretty well, especially there at the end when he was just focusing on his units.
Yeah.
I think to play at Teja a little bit, he actually took his units and did the same thing back. Like he pushed and pulled them back, and then took out like 4 or 5 Marines, and then the Marines pulled back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then right after that, he was just like, you know what, fuck this, GG. There's no way I can beat all those siege tanks.
Yeah, because I mean, after he got done throwing his lambs to slaughter, I'm pretty sure that that's when Teja decided to unsiege and move in.
Yeah,
And at that point, it was pretty much
game over.
a done deal. MKP couldn't do anything about it. The force was way too big. He had lost too many units going into his siege line.
Yeah, yeah. So on that note, let's go ahead and move into the second portion of the cast. We're actually going to start talking about StarCraft 2, Heart of the Swarm. We're going to cover some of the different things that we like and dislike about each of the races and their new units. So first up, we've got Protoss. They're losing their mothership and their carrier, but they're gaining the mothership core, the Oracle, and the Tempest. The Tempest being the air unit that's replacing the carrier. So let's go ahead and start with the mothership core. How do you feel about that?
Well, now I'm hearing that it's not just the mothership core. You can have a mothership in Heart of the Swarm.
Yeah, it's upgradable.
But right, but if you have a mothership, you do not have the mothership core,
Mm-hmm.
and you lose. I believe you still have mass recall, but you lose the purify ability.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat. And the purify ability, what it does for the mothership core is it pretty much positions the core over your nexus and gives it a brief amount of invulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to be a pretty key unit in any defensive minded style of playing TOS.
Yeah.
Because I mean, fuck it. If you've got a unit that's going to stop you from taking a base trade,
Mm-hmm.
by all means, stick it over your nexus and go.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the concept of the mothership core. I think it'll help Protoss players go for a more, believe it or not, early offensive game. Especially against a Zerg player that has speedlings and likes to just, when you're attacking their roach line, take those, like a small group of speedlings and run them up into the main. This will give the Protoss enough time to, hit the Purify button, blink Stalkers back, as fast as possible, pull everything back, try to clean up whatever's attacking the main, and get everything in working order as far as that goes. And with the mass recall too, you could also purify and then just mass recall. I don't know if I would assume that each one of those takes up half of the energy of the overall bar of the mothership core.
It actually does not.
It doesn't.
Does
Do you know
not.
how much energy each one costs?
I sure do. Uh, yeah, it's at the mothership cores. It actually is stationary, so it doesn't
Mhm.
move from over the nexus. That's something I didn't actually specify before. It does. You can't
Yeah.
move it. It just hovers over the nexus and does its deal. Once you upgrade it, you can do whatever you want with it. So as we know, motherships have 200 energy.
Yeah.
Purify takes 75, so you can pop two of those off back to back. It does have a 20-second cooldown,
Hmm.
but you can get two of those in one. 20-second cooldown. You might be able to get three actually, in terms of energy regen. However, mass recall is 150,
Ooh, so you can do
so
both.
you will not be able to do a purify and a mass recall simultaneously. Um, what you can do is it also is a teleport. You can teleport it from nexus to nexus.
Uh huh.
That's 25 energy, but I mean that isn't really mesh. Like what you could do, and actually this might be a really clutch tactic, is you teleport it to your nexus that's getting beat on, then you mass recall everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Because
would
you
be a
can do
good
that. That's
tactic.
175 energy. You'll have enough for that, and I think that's fuck. I'm gonna like to. I want to see that in some pro matches, man.
Yeah.
I want to see some clutch teleport mass recalls to like hold off early pushes. I think that would be really beastly, like
Yeah.
really beastly. And then finally, it actually has the ability to completely re-energize a unit for 25 energy.
Oh,
Yeah. So I
that.
think that'll be interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's only one. Does it have cooldown though? No. So you could actually spam it. So you could energize multiple units back to back.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so there's not going to be any purify mass recall nonsense, but I am looking forward to seeing some pretty cool teleport mass recalls. So I think that'll be really neat, especially in like a situation where it's ZVP.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that'll be pretty cool. So the next, let's go ahead and move on to the next unit, which is going to be the Oracle, and it's got two moves. It's the mineral blockage and mass cloaking. So it's actually taking over what the mothership used to do. Instead of making a mothership, you would just make an Oracle and have it hover over top of your units, and it cloaks units in a particular area. I'm not sure exactly what the yardage is on that, but it also cloaks buildings. My favorite thing about the Oracle is this mineral blockage. Especially against a Zerg player, it can really fuck them up. You take an Oracle, you put it inside their base, you drop it on whatever expansion, and they're without minerals off of those 1, 2, 3 mineral patches for a couple of seconds. I think it's 10 seconds, isn't it?
Well, no, 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 no. It lasts for a minute,
Oh,
but each entombment has its own health pool, so you can break them.
okay.
Um,
Have we been told how much health they have? I mean, is it
no,
something that a
well,
couple of drones could kill, or what?
not that I've been able to see.
Hmm.
I can't find any hard numbers on the life of the entombment. But like it's still going to be pretty. It's going to be pretty clutch for early game in any uh, respect because um, you're gonna need to get workers on there, and that's just even more workers you don't have mining things or getting gas.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think it'll be as good late game because a lot of Zerg have taken to putting spine crawlers in the mineral field.
Hmm.
So I would assume they'll just auto attack the entombed minerals. I can't see them not doing that. So It's probably not going to be something you're going to see later on in the game, but early on, I think it'll be pretty prevalent
Yeah, yeah, I
for
agree.
sure.
I really would like to see the Oracle being used flying around to expansions like this is late game obviously, and I believe that you can have as many oracles as you want. So say you got 5 base, you could take a oracle, put it at each one of your bases, and hover over top of it, and that entire base is then cloaked. So the only way that you're going to be able to get anything out of it is if um, the aggressor has some sort of detection,
Yeah,
and that'd be the only way they'd be able to kill the probes and the Nexus.
yeah,
I would like to see that.
yeah. They actually have a third move. It's called Preordain,
Hmm.
and it costs 75 energy. And pretty much what it does is it gives you vision of an enemy building and lets you see what they're building and or researching in that building.
Oh yes, I do remember that. I do
Yeah, because
remember that.
I think we saw that at BlizzCon,
We did. We did.
and for
Yeah.
some reason we forgot to take note of it today. So yeah, so that and it's I believe it's got either a minute and a half or a 2 minute duration. So like that is pretty badass because it literally gives you vision. Like you not only see what it's building, but it acts as a vision point for yourself.
Right.
Which means that you're going to be able to use it to possibly, shoot up cliffs. Or the next unit we're going to talk about, the Tempest, which is a long range specialist. You could probably use it as vision for them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that being used. The one thing that I think is really important, especially right now, Zerg are, well, not so much in a Protoss game, but I've seen a lot of Zerg put their evolution chambers, both of them, down at the bottom of the ramp. And if you're coming in just to do a snipe and get out, if your
Yeah,
Oracle drops that on there and you know exactly, which one is being um, researched, or even at the infestation pit, I think that knowing that your opponent is going for one of the infestor upgrades, extremely important. You could
yeah,
jump up in there with your blink stalkers, snipe it down, hop out, and then he's got to completely rebuild and retech.
yeah, yeah. I mean, pretty much, Heart of the Swarm is for Protoss at least is focusing on really throwing a huge monkey wrench in your opponent's plans.
Yeah,
That's really all. It's all about fucking up what they want to do and making them adapt.
it's actually, you have to micro. You have to do some sort of strategic stuff, kind of like what Hero was doing, what we were talking about earlier, where
Hmm.
he isn't just building a big ball of shit and throwing it, a big ball of death actually is what it's called, and just throwing it at the Zerg's base. He's actually having to do things that require reaction speeds and specific timings that you could figure that your opponent is going to go for 12 minute. This might be late. A 12 minute. I'm not a Zerg player, so a 12 minute infestor upgrade, and you need to be able to know about it, and then you have to take it down. Like, these are all really crucial times and points in the game that the Oracle will really help out with.
Yeah.
So the next unit is the Tempest, which is taking the place of the Carrier. I really like the Tempest personally. It's got long range and it's slow to charge. It does have a charge timer for every attack, but it's got an AoE attack. So, like, if you're fighting a bunch of Mutalisks, it just completely destroys. It's kind of like um, an air storm, if you will, and it's really nice.
Yeah, I mean it hits hard, it hits long. I believe with the upgrade, its maximum range is 22, so it can hit from damn near off the screen. And coupled with, like I was saying before, the Oracle's preordain ability, you're going to be able to just do these long range snipes in someone's base that they're going to really have to go out of their way to counter, because again, you're not going to be anywhere near their base,
Yeah.
and it's just another instance of the Protos's niche in Heart of the Swarm of just really just being a pain in your opponent's ass. Like, that's your whole job in life, is to just make their day shit
Yeah.
in every aspect of the game. Like, you want to mine? Fuck you. You want to see what I have? Fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to shoot down my aircraft? Fuck you, I'm too far away. Like, everything is just a big fuck you to your enemies. Which I think is cool, because right now Protoss doesn't have a lot of really fuck you items in their menu.
Yeah.
I
The
don't.
exception of the Colossi, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, Colossi have their own problems. They're certainly effective against what they're effective against. But I mean, you know, your opponent has any air units, your Colossus is dead.
Pretty much, yeah.
Bye bye. So so I think it's cool that Protoss is getting some really fun, really fun screw up your opponent's playstyle units, and it's certainly going to give like TOS a really nice diversity, I think, in builds and timings.
Yeah.
Once Heart of the Swarm is released,
Yeah.
which is really cool.
And I think that the way that this is going to, it's going for more of a right now, the way that the game is, it's all about builds, counters, and not so much mindfuckery. So I think with a lot of these new units that we're going to see a lot more mindfuckery, which is really nice. We see it now sometimes with, especially with Zerg. I really like watching them do Baneling play, because they'll take and they'll throw 800 overlords across the map, and the Protoss or the Terran player knows that something's going down. They just don't know where. And then all of a sudden, in their main base, 8 Banelings drop out of an overlord or 2 overlords and just completely roll over his base.
Yeah.
So with this particular set, I really like the fact that we're moving towards a more mindfuck stage of the game versus a micro macro intensive. It seems like a lot of it is based off of small micro moves, specifically for Terran, not so much the other races, because they're able to resupply so quickly. But being a ex Warcraft 3 player, I really like micro games. I feel like there's more clutch moments, and for them to be implementing this kind of play is really exciting for me.
Yeah, I'm just really excited to see what a lot of pros especially are going to be able to do with the added unit sets of Heart, because I think that after Heart of the Swarm is released, I think the pro scene is going to look a lot different than it does now.
Yeah.
Not only not necessarily in terms of the actual pros themselves. I don't, they're pros for a fucking reason. They're not going to go anywhere. But in terms of how the games play out, I think it's going to be a very different game. Very different game.
Yeah.
Because I mean, some of these units are just they add such a new dimension to a lot of the strategies for any of the races, really.
Yeah.
That a lot of players, just players in general, are going to have to rethink a lot of their strategies, because a lot of their timings and strats that they have
are no longer valid.
No longer apply, or they need these new elements worked into them.
Right.
And that's going to affect your overall timings as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be really cool. Really cool.
So let's go ahead and move on to the Terran real quick. We've got the Battle Hellions, the Warhounds, and the Widows. For those of you that don't know, the Battle Hellion is a really strong melee unit. The Warhound is it's got missiles that target mech only, and the Widow is like a bomb that just attaches itself to something and then after a couple of seconds explodes.
Yeah.
Personally, I like the Battle Hellion. The idea that we're going to be able to use Transformers inside of the game is kind of a cool concept for me. Um, I'm going to like the fact that the spray radius for the Battle Hellion is a lot wider. It's
But
not so
shorter.
far out, right?
Yeah.
But it's wider, and it'll do a shitload more damage to, say, Zerglings who have the surround on your army and are rolling banelings into it or something. And I think those Battle Hellions will be a really good asset to have in any ball of Marines.
Yeah, the what's kind of bugging me about Battle Hellions is I actually just read, I think it was on the actual wiki page for StarCraft, that um the Hellions are gonna by default spawn from a factory in Battle Hellion form.
I don't know that I like that.
Yeah, well, you're right, because on one hand, if you've got either Marines or Zealots massing your base, um, it's not necessarily a bad thing if they spawn in battle mode, because
Right.
that's a little bit more effective. But if you're getting like an early mid push by like a Zerg player, having them spawn in battle mode isn't necessarily the best idea, because then you have to take the time to convert them back into Hellions
Right.
to deal with the Zerglings.
Now, I think this is a good balance for the Zerg players, solely because right now, at the 7 minute marker, you see so many like Blue Flame or even not Blue Flame Hellions. There's 6 of them usually sitting right outside of a Zerg's second base, his natural, preventing them from expanding at all. It's kind of a shitty situation to be in, and it usually pushes the Terran to win the game.
Right.
So I don't think that the game this helps in that you for every Hellion that you pull out, you have to transform it and then move it. So in some regard, I get it. I understand. As far as balance goes, being the Terran player would be shitty because you want your strategy to work this way, but I'm being forced to take it and change it now because you know Blizzard's decided that they're gonna spawn this thing in the not usually normal stance. So I don't know. I got mixed feelings on it.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily gonna stop a situation where they're stopping a Zerg from expanding, but this change really affects Hellion play in the base. Like that, I mean, obviously that's what it's there for. Um, and again, like I think it'll be good if you're up against Terran or Protoss. I don't think it's going to be so good if you're going up against Zerg, and I think that's going to be a point of contention, and I would imagine among the higher level players, more so
Okay.
as time goes on. Because like as it stands right now, I mean, I know we just saw Teja just completely wipe out Prime, and what, three of them were Zerg.
Yeah.
As a whole, a lot of people feel that as of right now in higher level play, Terran is at a disadvantage against Zerg.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't think, and I'm not saying that that's true or not, because it's all going to boil down to the individual player at hand. But the general consensus is that Terran are at a bit of a disadvantage, and I don't think that this is going to help that mindset.
Yeah, no, probably not. But you know they've got two other units that they're coming out with. One of which is the Widow, and I think that'll pretty much even it out, especially against like big balls of shit, like Zergling runs and mutas and things that clump really easily together. I think it'll be uh, really beneficial to have. And
Yeah.
I would really like to see some of the micro play by some of these pro players to get to find the one unit that has the Widow on it and then move it away from his army. Because if he doesn't, not only is he losing that unit, but all the units around it.
Right. Right. And for those of you that might not know, the Widow is pretty much a fire and forget suicide unit. And pretty much it's a mine that burrows into the ground and waits for a unit to approach. The first unit to roll over the mine, it attaches itself to, and then detonates after 10 seconds. So, like like Minion was saying, um, in any type of pack situation, and I mean, it really does apply for any race.
Yeah,
It could be a toss death ball, it could be an M&M ball, it could be a fuck ton of Zerglings.
yeah,
In any type of high density confrontation, you're going to run the risk, if you're facing Terran, of having Widow Mines in the mix. And like he said, it's going to take a lot of micro to honestly probably even recognize that that's the case,
yeah,
and B, get that dude the fuck out of Dodge so that he doesn't take out the rest of your army.
yeah.
Um, and I personally can't wait to see
Now,
how this is going to play. This is going to be hysterical.
I would also like to see
Watching
that
this used.
that once the Widow's been activated, like in Warcraft 3, I'm going to use the Purge or Lightning Rod example. If you use the Lightning Rod on a unit, any unit around it, yours or the enemy's would take extra damage per second. So what I would like to see, and this is just like you would see it and you'd be like, oh damn, is like say a ball of Marines. It's Terran versus Terran. Ball of Marines are going at each other, and you find out that one side has Widows, the other doesn't. You find out which Marine has it. You stem that Marine into the opponent, the guy that actually laid the mine in the first place, and it when your unit blows up, it blows up the opponent's units as well.
Right.
That would be hot. Now I don't know exactly how the mechanics work for this, but
Well, I mean, it can attach itself. As far as I know, it can't attach itself to a friendly unit.
right, but the explosion, like the
But
nuke,
the explosion is friendly fire.
ooh, that's gonna be nice.
Yeah, and I mean, if a for example, let's say a Zerg player, if a Zerg player can um, correctly anticipate where the Terran might have placed some Widows, I mean, hypothetically, he could run a Speedling through that pass and then just drive it into the Terran's base,
Yeah, yeah,
and then use his own Widow against him.
yeah. But by the
Um,
same token, you could also put Widows at the bottom of the ramp, kind of like you do Banlings right now, of your opponent. And when they roll over it and they start walking out to the middle of the map, everything
yeah, they're
explodes.
just yeah, they're halfway to the fucking tower before they pop.
Yeah,
Yeah, but like I said, I personally can't wait to see to see this used, because I think it's going to be hysterical, and I think it's going to make for a lot of really awesome games when people really start finessing the usage of the Widow Mine. It's I'm sure going to piss a lot of people off, but I'm going to be laughing the whole time because I think it's going to be great.
yeah. So on that note, though, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I really fucking hate tech or mech armies. With the whole Thor siege tank seems like it's an impossible thing to kill. Um, just before it became popular, when I was doing a lot of 4v4s and I was Terran, I used to do like fast factories, 3 or 4 factories, and then I would get nothing but Hellions, Thors, and siege tanks, and it always raped face. Um, Now they've got the Warhound, so really excited to see this in action. Since it targets mech specifically, and it will also help with those really clutch turtle games between Terran versus Terran. Right now, we see a lot of marine drops in the middle of tanks to blow up their own tanks. Um, and I think we might even see something similar with the Warhound at first. Except the Warhound will be able to do damage at the same time as these siege tanks are dropping damage onto the Warhound.
Yeah, I mean it I really like the fact that like all the Warhound is really good for is taking out mech. Like I think that's really badass. Because like you said, and I'm sure a lot of people can empathize with, going up against a really heavy mech army sucks. And it just seems like it's layer after layer of you're not getting anywhere near me.
Yeah.
And personally, that's what I think is going to play a part in what might make the Warhound not quite as good as people think. And I'll explain what I mean. Unsieged, a siege tank has a range of seven units.
Yep.
Sieged, they have a range of 2 to 13.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is that the Warhound's range is 7. So, in terms of an unsieged tank, they're on fairly even ground, because they do roughly the same amount of damage,
Mm-hmm.
and they have the same range. But the minute that tank sieges itself,
Yeah, it's pretty much useless.
I feel like the Warhound is at an immediate disadvantage,
Yeah.
and um, I'm having a hard time. Like, I actually can see Warhounds going up against Thors and being really effective.
Mm-hmm.
Like really effective in numbers, because let's face it, a Warhound's going to cost much less than a Thor to make. You're going to be able to afford more. And Thors really shine anti-air.
Right.
So in terms of a ground engagement, I think Warhounds will be fairly well off against Thors. I really do. But I think a lot of people were hoping, because it can't hit air. So, Banshees, Vikings, all out of the questions.
Yeah.
Question. There are no questions. There's just one question, and the answer is no. So, I mean, really, what you're going up against is, well, I mean, I guess if they decide to Robotech the Vikings, but I mean, no one really worries about Robotech Vikings anyway. It's really only, I mean, really, once they're in the, in my opinion, Vikings are really dangerous in the air. I don't think they're quite as dangerous on the ground.
They're really, massing Vikings is only good in like 4v4s, where everybody else is going a massive amount of other shit, and you're left with whatever's left. So the best
Right.
option is to go straight Vikings, so that you can do drops in back of your opponent's bases and try to snipe out a couple of probes or something.
Right, but I mean, even then, I can't see a lot of people seeing some grounded, some Robotech Vikings and being like, oh man, that's not good. They're going to be like, oh look, it's a couple of Vikings, and they're going to go deal with them.
Yeah.
So, again, I guess the Warhound would be good there, and I feel like the one unit that everyone had hoped was, going to be good against was the siege tanks. And unless the missiles have a longer range than the Warhound's auto attack, which, quite honestly, I haven't been able to find out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I assume it would have to, because otherwise the unit's useless.
Yeah.
So it's gotta have a longer range than its base. I don't have any hard numbers on it, so I'm not 100% sure. Um, but they specifically showed it in the video fighting siege tanks, so I've gotta believe that it's going to be able to effectively take them out from range.
Yeah.
So I guess as far as this is concerned, we're gonna have to wait and see and get some hard numbers. And then if any of you guys are participating in any form of the beta, any feedback would be appreciated because
Greatly.
we're kind of in the dark here, and we're hoping that it really is effective against siege tanks. Because as we've been saying, that's all we can really think that it's good against.
That Thor's Stalkers Colossi.
Yeah, and I mean that's all well and done, but I think people really hoped that it would be awesome against siege tanks because fuck siege tanks.
Yeah, fuck siege tanks.
Fuck siege tanks.
Talking about fucking siege tanks, Zerglings. So let's move on to the Zerg. Swarm Host, Viper, and the Ultralisk gets a new move. The Swarm Host, I really like the concept behind the Swarm Host. What it does is it burrows and produces a constant stream of free units. And I believe I read somewhere that each unit gets increasingly stronger. So the longer it sits there, more damage it does. Not sure if that's an upgrade or if that's straight out of the gate, or if they've even done away with it. They might have done away with it since the last time I've researched it. But I really like something like this up against Terran players specifically. With the bunkers, I mean, everybody knows the natural bunker kind of gets old. So if you could pull that swarm, one or two swarm hosts, and you pull them up to the front line, and you got them burrowed into the ground, and they just start sending in units, waves and waves and waves of units, just slowly tanking this bunker down. I think it could be really effective. I also think it could be a really effective tool for Zerg to harass one base and hit another one. I'm going to call it the Kansas City Shuffle. Look left and then go right. I could see a lot of utility for this, and I'm really excited to see what some of our Class S Zerg players can actually do with this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Swarm Host because I don't think that it has the increased damage over time anymore, if it ever did. I don't remember reading that. But as far as I can tell, the only upgrade you can get for it is just to increase the lifespan of the locusts after they come out.
Oh, okay.
Because they only last for a limited amount of time after they get spawned. And you can actually research it up so that there's just a constant stream. As one dies, more are coming.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what I got it mixed up with.
And they actually surprisingly have a decent chunk of health. They have a decent amount of armor. They can do a decent amount of damage. And for a race that really relies on a lot of micro for almost all of its units, I think it's really cool that they've introduced a unit that you can kind of just fire and forget.
Yeah.
And it's not only that, but it's going to help that Zerg player micro better because they're not going to have to focus on microing the units coming out of that expansion. They don't have to do it anymore. They can put a swarm host or two there, have them stream units into the base, let them deal with that while you go micro what you want to micro, which is your attack on their natural or their main. So for a race that relies on a lot of micro, this is a really neat unit because it allows them the opportunity to focus more on the micro by not having to deal with situations hands-on that they don't want to at that moment.
Right, exactly.
And it's like you said, it's going to be really cool to watch some Code S players adapt their play styles and their strategies. Because I think that with the swarm hosts now, we're gonna see some different timings from Zerg
Oh,
because they're going to
certainly.
be able to afford to use different amounts of units in a different time span than they were able to before.
Right. I will tell you though, that's probably my least favorite out of the three. The one that I am really really excited to see is the Viper. Um, it's got a move called a duct, which pretty much grapples a unit and pulls it in. And it's also got a blinding cloud, which greatly reduces the weapon range of your enemies. I think we've also talked in the past about whether or not it would affect your own units. Again, I would like to see some more of that. It's something that really intrigues me. You know, even though you're the one dropping it, you still have to be wary of it. Um, and Abduct obviously is going to be amazing against Colossi, am I right?
Yes, because the Zerg need another fucking unit to make them pains in the ass. Jesus Christ. Like playing Zerg isn't awful enough. They now have a unit that lets you fucking steal their children. And we don't all have Liam Neeson for a father, so he can't come shoot a bunch of Serbians to get us back. But I
Throat chop.
mean, as a unit and as a gamer, I have to appreciate like what this thing does because um, a lot of a lot of Zerg play, I would say majority of Zerg play once you factor in the early mid late game, um, is focused on melee. Maybe not a majority, but I'd say about half because in later game it's really not a lot of melee, but it is a heavy part of the early to mid.
Mm-hmm.
And the Viper is going to allow Zerg players to really dominate that early mid melee game because you can't run anymore if they have a Viper with them.
Right.
You're not going to be able to take that key unit that's getting pounded on and then
Move it away.
move it away because he's just going to pull it back in and then it's dead.
Reminds me of Diablo
It's
3.
Yeah, it's so fucking dead. And not only is it
Fucking
so fucking
vortex.
dead, is that he's got the blinding cloud,
Yep.
so he can actually just tease you and try to get you closer to him.
Well, the mind fuckery is going to exist with this unit so
Yeah.
hardcore.
Yeah.
Could you imagine just someone bringing a Viper into a match and then, or into a major engagement, and just moving it up and back and moving it up and back? I would be
Yeah.
taking my Colossi and throwing it back in my base. No, you're not going to kill my fucking Colossi. I don't care if you take out my entire army. I'm going to keep him safe because you're just going to rape him in the face as soon as I let my guard down.
Yeah, and you know what though? That doesn't work either. Because if you don't want to put any units in his line of fire, it doesn't matter because he also has this other move. It's called like Devour or something like that. I forget what it's called. But the Viper does 200 or 250 damage, I think, to an enemy structure and then regains like a quarter of its energy.
Wow.
Yeah. So, when it's all energied out from grappling hooking your Colossi across the map to its death, it can go fucking chomp on your refinery and get its energy back.
Jesus. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So like this is just going to be a really douchey unit that
Yeah.
I don't anticipate going up against because it's going to give me douche chills when it grappling hooks my cool things across the map and kills them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely going to help with those surrounds.
Douches. And I mean, you know what? On the same page of douchebaggery, do ultralisks really need to travel underground at supersonic speeds to come up and fuck your shit up?
You know what? I say yes.
Yeah,
And
me too.
the only reason why I say that is because they are so underused solely because they're so big. You can't really get them to travel across the map very quickly unless you have creep. and well, that creep highway anyway, straight over to your opponent's base, which very seldom will your opponent even let you do that. And you know, I think that in order to take a Colossi out, aside from the Viper, or even siege tanks, which these units are extremely good against,
Yeah.
you need to get there quickly. But if you've got a line of Marines in front of you, you can't really get there, and it takes forever to get
Well,
around.
I mean, Ultralist versus Marine, the Ultralist is going to win 9 times out of 10. Unless,
Well,
they...
you gotta account for kiting.
Well,
So,
yeah, well, no. If they stim kite you, that's one thing. But if you're trying to get through them, you're going to get through them.
oh sure, in a
Um,
standalone fight, yeah,
yeah, I mean, you're going to get through them, but you're probably going to die in the process.
yeah,
And now with Burrow Charge, you're going to be able to make a unit that was um, previously way underused in almost any bracket of the game, um, and make it popular again because
hmm
you're going to be able to use it to snipe. I mean, you know what? Fuck going for like the big siege tank or the colossi. You can just pop it under a ball of Marines and
yeah,
just have it chomp them and just
yeah.
start chomping away.
Come right up in
And
the middle of
then
them.
yeah, and then boom, done deal. Your Marines are going. Where'd that Ultralist come from? I don't know.
Oh
I
man,
don't
and
know.
that's really gonna suck if we do some sort of like an infestor roach with like two ultralisks, because you drop the infestation bomb like right in the middle of the marine ball, and then you
Mm.
charge in your two ultras. GG.
Yeah, I mean that Ultra Charge is going to be nuts.
Yeah, I'm really glad that they're getting it though. They really need to be utilized more.
Well, yeah, because I mean, up until now, I personally couldn't think of a unit that was more underused than the Ultralisk.
Yeah,
Possibly Ravens.
maybe
Possibly.
they're really good
Uh,
in team battles.
well, I was talking about in terms of pro games.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't
they're
really
pretty
see a whole lot of
underused.
Ravens, but then again, you don't see a whole lot of Ultralisks either.
Right.
So, um, yeah, I hopefully once and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're going to give Ultralists energy either.
No.
They're probably just going to have, um,
A really long cooldown, I would think,
I
on
would
that.
say, yeah, a pretty sizable cooldown. I would think no less than 20 seconds,
Roughly.
25 seconds probably. But I do remember reading that in exchange for getting Burrowed Assault, they are losing their Frenzied passive.
Okay.
So they will be susceptible to snares and stuns.
hmm
Um, but again, traveling underground at really high speeds, I don't really foresee that being a problem.
No, no, not at all.
As long as they're
Unless,
played correctly, you know.
yeah, I mean, the only way I could see that really being messed up, especially with the whole snare thing now, is with the use of in a ZVZ, I
Hmm.
could see infestors dropping a fungal growth right on top of them in the middle of the charge, and it freezes them in place. That would
Right.
be pretty shitty.
Oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
but other than that, I don't really see anywhere where it would be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, played correctly. I don't see the loss of frenzy being that big of a deal.
Right.
Um, Played incorrectly, it could be a huge deal. But I mean, let's face it, in the matches that everyone's going to want to see, that shouldn't be that big of an issue. That's going to just be an individual aspect of a player's game that they're going to have to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note, folks, we've gone well over our normal 1 hour time frame. Um,
Really? How long have we been going for?
hour and a half,
Oh,
actually.
these poor people. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and this will be our second podcast. So we hope to see you all back. We will be doing these at least twice a week, every week. The Promise has put up What Extra One today on a Mass Effect review for the final, I believe it was three, right? Three final endings.
Well, yeah,
Um,
you did the extending endings for Mass Effect 3.
yeah. So that'll wrap it up for today. This is Dominion,
I'm the Promise.
and we'll see you next time.
Later.